Welcome to this week's Fit Finance sessions with myself, Tom Senegals, Tim Webb and Henry Elliston. We're all chartered financial planners at Efficient Portfolio. And the big news this week is there's not a lot going on, or not so much going on. Trump's a bit poorly. He's had to take a few days off. And I guess markets did sort of interpret the data a little bit negatively, but that seems to have bounced back today. But I think until you see big moves in the election or Brexit news or something else, then there's not a lot to discuss and not a lot influencing markets, although they have sold off a bit over the last coming weeks. But on my very informative roundup of nothing going on, Tim and Henry have kindly got some content to talk to you about. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, why not? I'll jump in. Funnily, as you pre-approved Brexit, actually, there was something late last week which was of interest in so far as the EU taking legal action against the UK. I don't know if you saw that at all. But Boris's sort of going back on the original treaty back in December time, which obviously is a fairly big move. But I don't know, there's Brexit news every morning, to be honest, and the market is kind of just swaying either way until as you say, a finite point is actually reached.
Yeah, it's all very priced in, I think, at the moment, and unless there's a change to the narrative, then it's kind of just moving within a range.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I was actually concerned watching the pound that day, and as soon as that happened, the pound fell off quite dramatically. However, then Michael Gove said, actually, the conversations were in good spirits, and what loss had just been made had instantly just been regained. So, yeah, I think it's by and large priced in to what we're seeing. Other than that, I mean, I think this morning there was this new JETS scheme in the UK announced as sort of the new targeted, or should just explain that, job entry targeted support scheme. So that's sort of furlough round 2, which is kind of this more targeted version of it, rather than that sort of blanket approach, which has been the initial stimulus put in. Is more targeted to those people who have been made unemployed or lost their jobs, etc. throughout COVID, with another £238 million coming out of somewhere. Sorry?
The money tree.
Yes, indeed. What's most likely going to be our pockets over the next 5 to 10 years, but there you go.
If anyone's looking for the money tree, it's behind Tim's chair there.
Yeah, I wish it was. If it was, I wouldn't be on this podcast, Tom.
You can staple £50 notes to that tree for next week's recording. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
So I guess there are things happening, but I think it's the same topics at the moment. We're waiting for a vaccine. We're waiting for US elections to go through. We're waiting for more Brexit deal news, and also just, I think, going into a second phase. It's kind of the planes are circling, waiting to land. We just don't know whether we're coming into land or taking off to the next place.
What a great analogy.
Henry, I think you were going to talk about some of the issues. Housing market's been pretty buoyant over the summer, maybe slowing down a bit, but there's also some issues and specific things around getting a mortgage that you were going to talk about.
Well, that's right. The market has been buoyant, hasn't it? I think the lack of stamp duty and certainly earlier in the summer, it was people spending too long in their little flats in London, wanting to move out to the shires with the green and pleasant land and rolling fields and countryside. But I think I think that's still happening. I think there is still property price growth seen outside of London. I don't think London's faring quite as well. But I was chatting to a friend of mine over the weekend who recently got married, and so he's looking to move out to the shires for both those reasons. One, that he's got married, and two, that he wants a bit more space. And he's run into a bit of a problem, and it's the cladding issue that comes on the back of the Grenfell fire, or the Grenfell Tower fire disaster. And he lives in a flat in central London, which he bought about 10 years ago. And the block of flats is clad, as are most relatively modern blocks of flats in London. And so he's looking to sell this property, and the estate agents have come around and explained to him that currently his property is pretty much unsellable because nobody will be able to take out a mortgage on this property because they don't know what this cladding is made of. And as it happens, this has culminated. A number of people in the block are all looking to sell, and so they're now having to go get a surveyor to come around and have a look at the property, work out whether or not this cladding is flammable. And if one assumes that it might be, then my friend, as a tenant of the building, and along with all the other tenants within the building, is going to get hit with a fairly sizable remediation bill that he currently estimates is going to cost somewhere between £30,000 and £50,000 for his flat alone. Which is just, I mean, I feel very sorry for the chap. I mean, it's not what anybody wants, is it? And I don't really know if there's any way around it. And I suspect for many people this will have knock-on effects. You know, I know in times, but you know, 5 or 6 years ago, there were big blocks being built up in Manchester and Liverpool, which I suspect have been built in a similar fashion, that people now have tenants in, but if they're trying to get out of being a buy-to-let landlord because of the various rules that are affecting landlords at the moment, it's going to make it very tricky for them to sell these properties. I mean, they'll find their money is essentially locked up. And of course, you know, especially if you would say up north, it is a bit different for much more expensive properties down south. But for those that aren't so expensive up north, actually covering the cost of replacing all the cladding is going to take up quite a significant proportion of the value of those properties. And I wonder actually in some cases if people just hand back the keys, leave them to the lenders and be done with it, because it's just not worthwhile going to that expense. So that was what I was looking at the Sunday Times this weekend, and chatting to my mate, poor chap. Anyway, fingers crossed it won't cost him that much, and he'll have a bit of money left over to get the work done and be able to move out to the countryside happily, where he can get himself a Labrador.
I think it comes back to what we were saying in one of our earlier podcasts around liquidity. Liquidity is never a problem until it's a problem. A bit like the cladding on your house, it's never a problem until it's on fire. And it just shows that if you can't access or realize your investment, there's a huge premium to be paid. And when everything's going fine, not an issue, but equally times like these when you might have to change circumstances, being able to stay liquid and do that is a value in itself. So yeah, important things to consider when making any investment, whether that's property or funds or shares or whatever it is how quickly can I realize them. But if anyone's having any issues with liquidity or just investments in general, anything you want us to cover, then please let us know. Let us know what you thought of the content this week, and if you want us to cover anything, please comment below. Take care and see you next week.